I remained on the bed, drowning in my tears which continued to flow. Madam shouted my name in the morning when she didn't see any sign of me washing the dishes. Mosuirat. I couldn't answer. She stormed into the room and saw me sitting on the floor, my hands around my folded legs as I swayed dejectedly, sobbing in the corner. She looked round the room, then saw my bed sheet was stained with blood. She didn't say anything but crossed to where I was and dragged me roughly to my feet. "You piece of filth, make sure you scrub the sheet and do your work, I'm going out." Then she slapped me, a backhand slap that dazzled me and made me see stars. The slap left a ringing in my head, but I still heard her hiss with a lot of venom before she stalked out. That was the first time Madam slapped me, but it would not be the last. From that moment, anytime Madam gave me an instruction, she would always leave an exclamation mark on my face. Ogre paid me another visit that night, and the night after that. I begged him and pleaded, but he seemed to enjoy my tears. Seeing his eyes reflected by the little moonlight that seeped into my room, I noticed he looked happier and smiled as I cried and begged him to stop. Whenever he left me, I would crawl to the floor and promise myself never to cry again, never to give him the satisfaction of my tears. But then he would creep into my room the following night and I'd begin to cry and beg him to leave me alone. And Madam would always hit me and beat me. She got a leather belt and would always be on the lookout for any mistake I made so she could beat me. No matter how careful I was, nothing was ever good enough for her. I had no one to confide in. I was yet to receive the education that had been promised me. I spent all my days locked up in the house like a prisoner. The day my father came to see me, I sat in the chair stiffly while he kept on bowing and thanking my captors for taking me into their loving home and providing food and clothes for me. He could see I was unhappy. I had tears in my eyes, but he chose to ignore me like I didn't have an opinion and whatever I said or felt didn't matter. I had long since learned to lock myself deep into a room in my mind, a room where I could continue to dance with my basket while my brothers clapped and my sisters sang. That was the only place I could be happy, even though it was a mirage, even though the memory was now black and white and devoid of color and life. So I sat in the chair, looking at them while I found reprieve in the fantasy of memory. Still I made a last-minute effort. I cried after him and told him I wanted to go back home with them, but my father just hugged me. "Don't worry, Mosu, you'll come and spend some time with us at home, and Jumal would come and join you soon, so you'll have someone to talk to and play with. I love you, okay?" I doubted if he loved me as I watched Ogre count some money and give to him. He showered praise on them and left. I was ashamed of my father. That night Madam brought out the belt again. "How dare you cry that you want to follow your father?" She beat me and sent me to bed without any food. And later that night Ogre woke me up. I have been raped and abused for 10 months. What was my crime? Being poor. Born into a poor family. Having parents that didn't really love me as they should. What did I do to deserve this? I was suffering for the sins of my parents. For the illiteracy and primitive mentality that made them think we were not good enough and had to serve other humans. I was too young to go through all these, but I had long accepted my fate, dreaming of the day I would run away and find freedom was the only thing that kept me going. But days after my father left, I kept on thinking of what he had said. My sister Jumet would be joining me soon in this hell. She was going to suffer just like I had. Madam was going to beat her and Ogre was going to touch her with his filthy hands like he did me. I cried almost every day, either when Madam was hitting me or whipping my back with the leather or when Ogre was crushing me with his weight, grunting and grinning at me. But as I thought of my little sister Jumal going through the same fate, I cried. This time the tears were different. It drained me of energy and left me lying in bed through the day. By nightfall I had made up my mind. My sister was not going to suffer the same fate. I didn't know what I would do about it, but I had to do something. Then the rats attacked. Somehow they found their way into the house through the sewage plumbing. Big, black sewer rats with long tails and slimy furs. They scurried about the house, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. They nibbled the edges of the curtains, nibbled the television cables, nibbled on Olga's work documents and Madam's sandals. They destroyed everything and Madam couldn't stand them. She would scream and scream at each sighting, shouting, "Filthy rats! Filthy rats!" Her screaming annoyed me because I thought she was just being hypocritical. Compared to her husband, the rats were almost spotless. Her husband was the dirtiest animal and she knew it. I had seen the way she looked at me, the way she looked at him, and I know she knew. She knew the terrible things he did to me, but she overlooked it. Madam hated rats so much she brought a carton of rat poison home one day from work. I watched her as she mixed the powder with pieces of meat and fried fish and placed it in strategic positions around the house. In the dark corners the rats always disappeared to, under the sink, behind the cupboard, behind the curtains in the store. 2 days later, an unbelievable stench filled the house. She instructed me to find all the dead rats responsible for the smell and dispose them before she came back from work that evening. I followed the smell and found 4 big dead rats around the house. I disposed of them outside and returned to the spots to spray disinfectant and mop the floors, and I marveled at how effective the poison was. I began to wonder how it would be if ingested by a human. I took a box and hid it in my room. That was last week. I went through the roller coaster of emotions all week. Should I or shouldn't I? Could I or couldn't I? But all it took was one more visit from Olga and I knew I couldn't survive the abuse anymore. I couldn't let my sister come and suffer the abuse too. I waited patiently for my opportunity. Now that my mind was made up, the opportunity wasn't forthcoming. I waited all week, growing frustrated with each passing day, each passing slap from Madam and each passing night visit from Olga until today. Today I finally carried out my revenge. Lately Olga had been coming home earlier than usual. And whenever he got home before Madam, he would hold me roughly and instruct me to do dirty things to him. He came home earlier today and immediately called me to his room, but before he could get started we heard the sound of the gate opening. Madam has arrived. If I hear you say anything, I'll kill you. He shoved me roughly and buckled his belt. I ran out, adjusting my gown, and managed to enter the kitchen before Madam. Welcome, Ma. Idiot. Hurry up and wash this fish, then put it on fire. I already turned my cheek, expecting the slap which she dished out happily. I hurried to the sink while my cheek throbbed. I stayed in the kitchen with Madam, to lend a helping hand as she prepared dinner, fetching the ingredients she needed, being helpful, but I was waiting for my chance. When she put the soup on low heat and left the kitchen, I waited till I could hear her voice in the room talking with Olga. Then I quickly opened the cupboard and emptied the whole box of rat poison in the soup. Then I rushed into my room and shut my eyes. I had finally done it. Mosuirat. Yes, Ma. I rushed to the kitchen as my heart pounded. Somehow she had found out about what I had done and I was in big trouble. But she was already dishing the soup. The melon soup smelled delicious and I looked at the large quantity she had put in the bowl for she and Olga. They loved eating together and this was their last supper. Go and set water to wash hand on the dining table. She snapped and I hurried away. I stood at the entrance, with my heart in my throat until they began to eat, and then I began to smile. But my smile disappeared when I heard the words that haunt me to this very hour. Honey, guess what? I'm pregnant. So here we are. They continue to laugh and talk as they enjoy their last supper, making plans for the child. They don't know the child would never see the light of day. Tears begin to trickle down my face as I dish my own soup. I'm too young to have made the kind of decisions I made today, too young to have gone through the physical and emotional trauma of the last 10 months. At least Olga and Madam are not going to put another child through their abuse. My sister isn't going to suffer what I suffered. They are going to pay for their sins. If you hear my story, I plead with you to search yourself. There are other young girls and boys going through what I went through, suffering physical and sexual abuse, and they have no one to stand for them and speak for them. Please, don't be like my parents. Don't sell off children for money, and don't turn a blind eye when you see a child crying, because most times the tears run deep, deeper than we can ever imagine. There are wicked people in this world who enjoy torturing and abusing helpless children just because we can't fight back. Please don't let us suffer for sins we did not commit. The truth is that 2 children are going to die tonight, the unborn child and I, for the sins of our parents. If you read my story and still find me guilty, I agree with you, my innocence was stolen after all. But first, let me eat my meal in peace.